The admiral pointed straight at the cop with the gun. "These men assaulted my wife. I want them off her. Now." The professional officer didn't hesitate. "Disarm him," he ordered. Two of his men moved fast, grabbing the stunned cop and twisting his arms behind his back. The gun clattered to the ground. The crowd started murmuring louder now, some cheering, others still recording with shaky hands. Relief washed over her in waves, but beneath it, anger still burned. Her body trembled as she clutched her shirt closed, her heart still racing. One of the new officers stepped toward her gently. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She shook her head, tears spilling over now that the danger had passed. They said I stole something. I didn't do anything." Her husband's arm wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You don't have to explain yourself to anyone," he said softly. "Not anymore." The professional officer nodded, his jaw tight. "We'll take them in, sir. Every single one of them." The crowd began to break apart slowly, people whispering, some offering her comforting words as they passed. She nodded, too drained to speak. They walked to the black SUV together, her husband keeping her close, as if he could shield her from the whole world. She climbed in, sinking into the seat, her mind spinning. He shut the door gently and walked around to the driver's side, sliding in beside her. For a long moment, they just sat there in silence, the hum of the engine filling the air. She finally whispered, her voice trembling. How did you get here so fast?" He stared out the windshield, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I came back early," he said. "I wanted to surprise you. But then I saw them grabbing you." His voice broke, just for a second. "I thought I'd lose my mind." She reached over, placing her hand on his arm. "You didn't. You saved me." He turned then, looking at her torn shirt, the red marks on her skin where they had held her too tight. His eyes softened but burned with a promise. "No one will ever hurt you like that again." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. They drove off slowly, leaving the flashing lights behind. The streets seemed quieter now, emptier, but her mind was still loud with everything that had happened. For a while, they drove in silence. The city passed by in a blur, buildings and streetlights melting into streaks of light. She leaned her head against the window, trying to calm her racing heart. But then, a loud crash shook the car. The SUV jerked violently to the side, tires screeching against the asphalt. She screamed as her body slammed into the door, pain shooting through her shoulder. Her husband fought with the steering wheel, his face set in grim focus. Outside, through the shattered blur of lights, she saw it. A truck, dark and unmarked, had rammed them from behind. Another hit. The car spun, her scream torn from her throat, glass shattering around her like tiny falling stars. And then everything went dark. Her ears rang like 1,000 buzzing bees. For a moment, there was nothing but darkness and the sharp smell of smoke. Then the world came rushing back in jagged pieces, groaning metal, shouts somewhere outside, the soft hiss of something leaking. She blinked rapidly, her vision swimming. The SUV was tilted, the front end crumpled against a streetlight. The airbag had exploded, hanging limp and torn. Her chest hurt where the seatbelt had caught her. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she touched her face. Warm blood ran down from a cut on her forehead. Are you okay?" Her husband's voice was rough, urgent. She turned dizzy and saw him half-turned at his seat, a dark bruise already blooming on his cheek. His uniform was dusty and torn at the sleeve, but his eyes, sharp, alive, scanned her quickly, searching for injuries. I think so," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "What happened?" "They hit us," he said, already unbuckling his belt. "Hold on." He pushed his door open with a loud creak, then staggered out. Through the cracked windshield, she saw him move quickly around the car, opening her door. His strong arms lifted her carefully, cradling her as if she were glass. Her legs felt weak as he set her on the sidewalk. All around them, people had stopped. A few cars had pulled over, but there was something strange about the truck that hit them. It had stopped just a few meters back, its engine still rumbling. The headlights glared like angry eyes. Then the truck doors opened. Two men stepped out. They weren't wearing police uniforms. Black jackets, caps pulled low, Their faces were shadowed, but something about them made her heart race. Her husband tensed, stepping slightly in front of her. "Stay behind me," he said softly. The first man spoke, his voice low and cold. "You shouldn't have interfered, Admiral." The words chilled her blood. "Who are you?" her husband demanded, his voice like steel. The second man laughed quietly. "Not your concern anymore. Hand her over." Her breath caught. She clutched the torn edges of her shirt tighter, feeling exposed and terrified all over again. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Her husband didn't answer. His stance shifted, ready to fight if he had to. The street light flickered above them, shadows dancing across the pavement. The crowd that had gathered seemed unsure. Some started backing away, sensing the danger in the air. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," the first man said, stepping closer. His hand moved under his jacket. Her heart pounded. She grabbed her husband's arm. "We need to go," she hissed. But it was too late. The second man pulled out a weapon, a long, black baton that crackled with electric sparks. He slammed it against his palm, the sound sharp and threatening. The first man smiled, dark and cold. "Last chance." Her husband squared his shoulders, his jaw tight. "You'll regret this." Then, without warning, the first man lunged. Her husband shoved her back hard. She fell to the ground, scraping her hands on the rough concrete, just as the baton swung through the air with a hiss. Sparks lit up the night. Her husband blocked it with his forearm, grunting in pain. "No!" she screamed, scrambling to her knees. The crowd scattered, people running in all directions, their screams filling the air. A car horn blared as another vehicle swerved to avoid the chaos. The second man circled around, moving toward her, his dark eyes locked on her trembling figure. "Stay still," he hissed. She scrambled backward, palms stinging, breath coming in frantic gasps. Her husband fought the first man with desperate strength, but she saw blood trickling down his arm where the baton had struck. "Leave her alone," he shouted, striking out with his fist, catching the first man across the jaw. The man stumbled back, spitting blood, then lunged again. She tried to stand, but her legs wobbled. The second man was too close now, his shadow falling over her. And then, suddenly, a gunshot split the night. The second man froze mid-step, eyes wide, something unreadable flashing across his face. She turned her head slowly, heart hammering, to see where the shot had come from. Someone stood at the far end of the street, hidden partly in the dark, a figure holding a smoking gun, but she couldn't see the face. Not yet. The night hung still for half a second, like the whole world had stopped breathing. Smoke curled gently from the gun in the distance. The second man hesitated, his body twitching as if deciding whether to run or finish what he'd started. Her husband didn't wait. With a sudden burst of strength, he rammed his shoulder into the first man, knocking the baton from his grip. The weapon clattered to the ground, sparks dancing briefly before dying. "Get away from her!" the admiral roared, shoving the man backward. The second man spun toward the sound of the gunshot, his eyes darting to the shadowed figure at the end of the street. The figure stepped forward slowly, and the dim streetlight revealed more. A woman's face, dark and fierce, her jaw set tight. She wore a leather jacket and jeans, and her grip on the gun was steady. "Move one step closer to her," she said coldly, "and you won't get a second warning." The second man's lips curled into a snarl. "Stay out of this." The woman didn't flinch. "Drop it." Her husband moved fast, grabbing the first man by the collar and slamming him against the side of the SUV. The man groaned, trying to fight back, but the admiral's grip was iron. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. She scrambled backward until she hit the wall of a nearby shop, trying to steady her shaking hands. The second man's eyes flicked between the gunwoman and her husband. He let out a sharp whistle. From somewhere down the road, tires screeched. A second truck appeared, headlights blinding, roaring toward them. "Run!" her husband shouted. The gunwoman fired again, the shot sparking off the second truck's front grille. The driver swerved, trying to avoid the bullets, and smashed into a parked car. Glass shattered everywhere. The second man lunged toward her. She screamed, scrambling to her feet, but her legs felt like lead. He was almost on her when the gunwoman sprinted forward, tackling him to the ground. They rolled across the pavement, the gun skidding out of her hand. Her husband shouted her name. She turned just in time to see the first man twist free of his grip and grab a shard of broken glass from the ground. "Behind you!" she cried. But the first man swung, slicing through the air. Her husband staggered back, blood blooming across his shoulder. "No!" she screamed, running toward him despite the chaos, despite the danger. He stumbled but caught himself, fury flashing in his eyes. He lunged back at the attacker, fists flying. The first man grunted as he was slammed back against the SUV again, this time harder. Meanwhile, the gunwoman and the second man kept struggling, rolling dangerously close to the broken glass and sparking baton. The second truck's driver was trying to crawl out of his wrecked vehicle, groaning in pain. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance again, but they felt far away. The woman finally got the upper hand, pinning the second man and slamming her fist into his jaw. He went limp for a second, enough time for her to grab the baton and press it against his chest. Sparks flashed, and he jerked violently before collapsing. Her husband turned to her, panting, blood dripping down his arm. "Are you hurt?" "I am okay," she stammered, tears spilling freely now. "But you?" "I'm fine," he said, though his face was pale. "We have to move. There might be more." The gunwoman picked up her gun, standing over the second man's body. "You need to get out of here," she said quickly. "They're not alone." Her husband nodded. "Thank you, whoever you are." The woman's eyes softened just slightly. "A friend. Now go." He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the SUV, but the vehicle was totaled. He cursed under his breath, scanning the street. A small sedan had stopped a few feet away, its driver frozen inside, eyes wide. "Out!" the admiral ordered, rushing to the car. The driver didn't argue, scrambling out and running down the street. Her husband opened the passenger door, shoving her inside. She could barely breathe, adrenaline still rushing through her veins. "Who are they? Why are they after me?" "I don't know," he said, sliding into the driver's seat. "But I'm going to find out." The gunwoman backed away, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as she had appeared. The admiral slammed the sedan into gear and sped down the street, tires screeching. The city lights blurred past, but her mind was spinning too fast to make sense of anything. She pressed a trembling hand against his bleeding arm. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he said, though his jaw was clenched tight. "Just stay low." "Where are we going?" she whispered. "To somewhere safe," he answered. "We'll figure out the rest later." The sedan turned sharply down a narrow alley. For a moment, there was only the hum of the engine and their ragged breathing. But then a shadow moved ahead, too fast, too sudden. Her husband slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt. Standing in the middle of the alley was a man in a long coat, his face hidden by the dark. He lifted both hands slowly, but in one hand, something glinted under the dim streetlight. A knife. And he started walking toward them. The knife caught the faint light like a cruel smile. Each step the man took echoing through the narrow alley. Her breath came in short, terrified bursts. Her fingers dug into the seat, as if she could anchor herself to the car. Her husband's hand shot out, pressing her back gently but firmly. "Stay down," he said, his voice calm but sharp, like a blade itself. The man in the coat tilted his head, his slow steps deliberate, unhurried, as though he already knew he had them trapped. The walls of the alley were tight, littered with trash bins and broken crates, no clear way around. "Turn around," her husband barked, voice commanding, the tone of a man used to having his orders followed. But the man didn't stop. He didn't even blink. He only smiled, a small, cold smile that made her skin crawl. "You shouldn't have interfered," the man said softly, his voice low but carrying in the alley. "Now you've made it worse." Her husband's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Who sent you?" No answer. The man's steps quickened. Her husband threw the car into reverse, tires squealing as they shot backward out of the alley. She gasped as the car jolted over a pothole, her shoulder slamming against the window. The alley's mouth widened behind them, but just as they reached it, two more figures stepped into the street. Her heart dropped into her stomach. They were blocking the exit, both holding metal pipes. their faces hidden by masks. "Get down," her husband shouted. She ducked low, covering her head with trembling arms as the masked men charged forward. One swung the pipe hard against the windshield with a deafening crack. Spiderweb cracks spread instantly, shards raining down on the dashboard. Her husband rammed the gearshift into drive and shot forward, the car lurching toward the man with the knife. He leaped to the side, rolling against the wall, but his coat caught on the car's mirror and ripped with a loud tear. The sedan swerved, scraping against the brick wall, sparks flying. She screamed as the impact rattled her bones. The masked men gave chase, pounding after them on foot, but her husband managed to swing the car around the corner, tires shrieking, leaving them behind for now. Her chest heaved as she sat up slightly, brushing broken glass from her lap. "Who are these people?" she cried, voice breaking. "I don't know," he said, panting, his knuckles white on the wheel. "But someone's sending them after you. They don't care about the law. They don't care who I am. And that makes them dangerous." He took another sharp turn, racing down an empty side street. She stared at him, tears streaking her face. "Why me? I'm no one." "You're my wife," he said, his eyes flicking to hers for just a second. "That's enough." The street ahead opened onto a dark overpass. He drove up onto it, the wind rushing around them. For a brief moment, it was quiet except for the growl of the engine and the pounding of her heart. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing, clutching the torn edges of her shirt again. But peace didn't last. Headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, bright, fast, gaining on them. Her husband swore under his breath. "Hold on." She turned to look behind them, and her blood turned cold. A black SUV, the same kind the cops had used earlier, was racing after them. "They found us," she whispered. "Not for long," he growled, pressing the accelerator to the floor. The sedan roared, speed climbing, but the SUV closed the distance easily, its engine a deep, hungry growl. "They're going to hit us again," she cried, gripping the door handle. "Not if I can help it," he said, eyes locked on the road. The SUV swerved left, then right, trying to line up. Her husband swerved too, the tires screeching. The overpass curved sharply, and for a second, the SUV dropped back. She dared to breathe. And then the SUV surged forward and slammed into their rear bumper. The car jolted violently, throwing her forward. She screamed as her head hit the dashboard, stars bursting in her vision. Her husband fought with the wheel, the car fishtailing wildly on the overpass. Another hit. The sound of crunching metal filled her ears, the sedan shuddering, skidding closer to the edge of the overpass. Her heart froze as she saw the drop, a black void below, streetlights far away. "Hold on," her husband shouted. She clutched the seat, but the SUV hit them again, harder this time. The guardrail screamed as the sedan slammed against it. Sparks lit up the night. Her breath caught as the car tipped slightly, the edge so close she could see nothing but air beyond it. The SUV rammed them one more time, and the sedan's tires lifted off the ground, the world tilting as they went over the edge. The world seemed to slow down. For a heartbeat, the sedan hung in the air, as if the night itself had frozen them between life and death. Her scream ripped through the darkness, raw and broken, as gravity seized the car and yanked it downward. Her husband's arms shot across her chest, holding her back as the car plunged. The wind roared through the broken windshield, tossing her hair into her face. Lights blurred and spun wildly as the sedan tumbled. They hit the ground with a bone-shattering crash. Metal shrieked. Glass exploded. The seatbelt cut into her shoulder as the air was knocked from her lungs. The car spun, rolled, and finally slammed onto its side with a violent jolt that made her ears ring. Then silence, except for the hiss of leaking fluid and the distant wail of sirens. She coughed, tasting blood in her mouth, her hands clawing at the seatbelt. Her head throbbed, every movement sending pain lancing through her body. Her husband groaned beside her, half hanging from his seat, his hand still outstretched as if trying to shield her even now. "Are you alive?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He coughed, eyes squeezing shut before opening again, fierce and determined. "I'm here. I'm here. Can you move?" "I think so." Her hands fumbled with the seatbelt until it finally released, dropping her roughly against the tilted door. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to crawl through the shattered window. The ground outside was littered with glass and debris, the air thick with smoke and gasoline. He followed, wincing, his uniform torn and stained with blood. He stumbled but caught himself, scanning the area quickly. The overpass loomed above them, dark against the city lights. Then they heard it, the low growl of an engine. She whipped her head around, her heart freezing. The black SUV had stopped on the overpass above them. Its headlights glared down like twin predators' eyes. The driver's door opened slowly. A tall figure stepped out, the same figure who had grabbed her earlier, the tallest cop, the one who had ripped her shirt. His uniform was gone now. He wore dark clothes, a bulletproof vest, and in his hand a rifle. Her husband stiffened. "Run," he said quietly. She shook her head, terror rising in her throat. "We can't outrun that car again." "Run," he barked, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the shadows under the overpass. They ran, stumbling over broken concrete and twisted metal. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed in protest, but she didn't stop. Behind them, the sound of boots on metal echoed as the man climbed down from the overpass, slow and steady, like he knew he had all the time in the world. They ducked into a narrow passage under the bridge, where old graffiti covered the walls. Water dripped from somewhere above, and the smell of damp earth filled her nose. Her husband pressed her against the wall, whispering urgently, "Stay behind me, no matter what." "I don't want you hurt again," she said, her voice cracking. He cupped her face briefly, his thumb brushing away a tear. "I'd take 1,000 wounds before I let him touch you again." Her chest tightened. She wanted to say more, to tell him how afraid she was, but footsteps echoed closer, cutting off her words. The tall man's voice carried through the shadows. "You think you can hide from me, Admiral?" He laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "She's coming with me. And you're not leaving this bridge alive." Her husband's jaw set. He crouched low, picking up a length of broken pipe from the ground. His knuckles were wet around it, his body coiled tight like a spring. The footsteps grew louder. She saw the man's shadow stretch across the wall, long and jagged in the flickering light of the overpass lamps. Her breath caught as the man stepped into view, the rifle raised, his eyes burning with that same hate from before. "This ends now," the man hissed, aiming straight at her. Her husband lunged, swinging the pipe with all his strength. A gunshot thundered through the narrow space. She screamed. The pipe slipped from her husband's hand. He staggered, his eyes wide with shock, and blood bloomed dark and thick across his side. "No!" Her scream tore through the cold night as she lunged forward, catching him just as his knees buckled. His weight sank into her arms, heavy and terrifying. Warm blood soaked through her fingers as she pressed her hand against his side, desperate to stop it. You're gonna be okay," she choked out, tears blurring her vision. Please stay with me." His eyes fluttered, but he managed a weak, pained smile. "I promised, didn't I?" His voice was strained, thin, but still calm. "I won't let him take you." Behind them, boots crunched on gravel. The tall man's voice came again, cold and steady. "You should have stayed out of it, Admiral. You should have known better." Rage, hot and wild, flared in her chest. She turned, still holding her husband against the wall, and shouted, "Why? Why are you doing this?" The man tilted his head, lowering the rifle slightly. "Because people like you never learn your place," he said, almost casually, as if talking about the weather. "And men like him think they can tell us what to do. But not tonight." She felt her husband's fingers weakly brush her arm. "Run," he whispered, his breath shallow. "I'm not leaving you." They ripped her shirt. The street was filled with flashing red and blue lights, their angry glow bouncing off the walls of the small convenience store. People stood frozen, some with their phones out, some too afraid to record. Her breath came in short gasps as she struggled, her arms pinned behind her back by a man twice her size. "Hold her still," one of the cops barked, his voice sharp and full of something that made her stomach turn pure hate. The rough hands pulled harder. The sound of tearing cloth split the air like a whip. Her shirt ripped open completely, buttons popping, fabric giving way. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She stood there, chest heaving, her bra exposed under the harsh streetlights, skin burning with shame and anger. The cops smirked, their eyes crawling over her with something that made her feel smaller than a grain of sand. And then, his voice cut through the night. "Release my wife. Now." The tallest officer froze mid-motion, his hand still gripping her torn sleeve. The other two turned slowly toward the man, who had stepped out of the black SUV parked by the curb. The man's broad shoulders filled the doorway, his uniform glinting in the streetlight. Gold buttons, navy blue jacket, medals that shone like tiny stars across his chest. An admiral. Her husband. Silence fell like a heavy blanket over the scene. The cops' faces shifted. First confusion, then disbelief, then something close to fear. The tallest one stammered, "Sir," but no words followed. The crowd murmured. Someone whispered, "Is that?" "No way." The admiral stepped closer, his jaw tight, his dark eyes locked on the hands still holding his wife. His voice dropped low, a growl that seemed to shake the air. "Do you know who you just assaulted?" The officer holding her let go so suddenly she stumbled forward, catching herself on shaky legs. She turned her eyes to her husband, tears stinging, anger burning like fire in her chest. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his presence wrapping around her like a shield. But then, one of the cops slowly reached for his gun, and everything stopped. It had not started this way. Hours earlier, the day had been calm, almost too normal. The sun was bright, spreading its heat across the busy streets. She had woken up that morning with a smile, humming softly to herself as she watered the little flowers on her porch. She loved mornings like that, peaceful, filled with hope. Her husband was away at sea, or so she thought. He often surprised her, but this time, she believed he was still far away. She wore a light blue shirt and white jeans as she stepped out to run errands. The market buzzed with laughter and chatter. Vendors called out their prices. Children ran between stalls, and she felt safe. She stopped at the fruit stall first. The vendor, an old woman with kind eyes, handed her a bag of ripe mangoes. They chatted for a while, laughing over something silly. Then she bought bread from the bakery down the street. The smell of freshly baked loaves made her smile even more. But as she walked to the small convenience store on the corner, things changed. A police car crawled slowly past, then stopped. Two officers stepped out, eyes fixed on her. At first, she thought nothing of it. Maybe they were looking for someone else. She held her bag close and kept walking. "Hey, you there!" One of them barked. She turned, confused. "Yes, come here." Now, people turned to look. A few whispered. She frowned but stepped closer. "Is something wrong?" "Don't play smart," the taller cop said, his lip curling. "Show us your ID." She quickly reached into her purse and handed it over. He snatched it, scanning it with narrowed eyes. "This isn't yours," he said suddenly. Her heart skipped. "What? Of course it is. Look at the picture. Look at my name." "Shut up," he snapped, throwing the card to the ground. "You think you can fool us? You think you can steal from this store and walk free?" She felt heat rush to her face. "Steal? I haven't stolen anything. I just got here." But he was already stepping closer, his partner circling around her like a predator. The air grew thick, the crowd watching but no one daring to step forward. Her hands trembled. "Please, I didn't do anything." "You people," the taller one sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "Always lying, always stealing, thinking you can get away because you smile nice." Something inside her cracked. "Don't talk to me like that," she yelled, tears pricking her eyes. And that's when he grabbed her arm. Hard. Pain shot up her shoulder as he twisted it behind her back. The other cop grabbed her other arm, yanking her so rough her bag fell to the ground, spilling mangoes across the dusty pavement. "Stop. Let me go," she cried, struggling. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted. She didn't do anything. But no one moved closer. The taller cop laughed, a harsh sound. "Oh, you're feisty, huh? Let's see what you're hiding." He yanked at her shirt, and before she could even scream, the fabric tore. Buttons flew. She froze in shock, her chest exposed to the world, her heart pounding like a drum. Shame flooded her, hot and suffocating. And then came the sound of an engine, a car door slamming, heavy footsteps, a voice like thunder. "Release my wife." Now, the world tilted. The admiral's uniform gleamed under the streetlights. The cops froze, their smirks fading. The crowd murmured, whispering his title in awe. But then the smallest cop, his hand twitched toward his gun. His eyes burned with something dangerous. Her breath caught. Her husband's hand tightened on her shoulder. And then, the cop's fingers brushed the handle of his gun. His face twisted with stubborn anger, as if the truth in front of him was something he refused to see. The street seemed to hold its breath. The admiral's eyes locked on that hand, and in that second, she thought the world might explode. "Don't you dare," her husband said, his voice low, calm, but so sharp it cut through the night. But the cop sneered. "I don't care who you are." She resisted. "That's enough for me." The gun lifted just an inch, and the crowd screamed. A woman dropped her shopping bag, apples rolling into the gutter. A man stepped back so fast he tripped over the curb. Then, in a blur, the admiral moved. He stepped in front of his wife, his broad frame shielding her as his own hand darted to his side. He wasn't armed, not in that way, but his voice rose like a whip. "Put that down." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The only sound was the frantic rhythm of her breathing. She clutched the torn edges of her shirt, eyes darting between her husband and the cop's shaking hand. The cop hesitated. His partner muttered something under his breath, too low to hear. The taller officer took one step back, confusion written across his face. Then sirens wailed in the distance, more police cars rushing toward them. The crowd parted as the lights grew closer. Her knees felt weak. The admiral turned, his eyes softening as they met hers. "It's going to be okay," he whispered. But even as he said it, she could see the muscle in his jaw tightening. He was furious, more furious than she'd ever seen him, but he was holding it in for her sake. Before she could answer, the arriving police cars skidded to a stop, and several officers jumped out. These ones looked different, more alert, more professional. One of them recognized the admiral instantly. "Sir," the officer barked, saluting quickly. "What's going on here?" "Run," he said again, his eyes locking on hers, pleading. She shook her head, her hands trembling. "I can't." The tall man stepped closer, raising the rifle again. "Enough talk." Something inside her snapped. She gently lowered her husband against the wall and stood, her legs shaking but firm. She didn't have a weapon. She didn't even have her bag anymore. But she had her voice, her anger, her fear turned into fire. "You think you're strong," she yelled at him, her voice echoing under the bridge. "You think hurting people makes you powerful." The man paused, surprised by her sudden defiance. His lip curled into a cruel smile. "Power is taking what you want, and no one stops me." Her fists clenched. "You're wrong." She bent down quickly, grabbing the blood-slick pipe her husband had dropped. Her fingers wrapped around it tight. The man laughed, amused by her attempt. That's your big plan." He started walking toward her, slowly, confidently. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. She raised the pipe, her arm shaking, her body screaming to run but her mind screaming to fight. "Stay back," she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. He didn't stop. His rifle gleamed under the dim lights as he took another step. She swung. The pipe sliced through the air with a metallic whoosh. It connected with his arm just as he raised the rifle to fire. He cursed loudly, stumbling back a step, the weapon jerking upward as a bullet fired into the ceiling with a deafening bang. She didn't stop. She swung again, harder this time, catching his shoulder. He growled in pain, his eyes flashing with fury. "You little—" he snarled, lunging at her. She screamed and swung once more, but this time he caught the pipe mid-swing, ripping it from her hands. The force knocked her to the ground, her palms scraping against the rough concrete. The man loomed over her, the rifle now in his other hand, blood trickling from his bruised arm. His shadow swallowed her, his breath heavy with rage. "You should have run," he hissed, raising the rifle. She scrambled backward, her mind spinning, heart hammering against her ribs, when suddenly, a loud roar echoed from above. Headlights flooded the dark passage as another vehicle screeched to a halt at the mouth of the underpass. Doors slammed open. Voices shouted commands she couldn't make out. The tall man glanced toward the lights, eyes narrowing, then back at her. He stepped closer, rifle aimed directly at her forehead now. Her husband, still slumped against the wall, groaned. His eyes fluttered open. He saw the rifle. He saw her. His lips moved soundlessly, but she knew what he meant. Move. She dove sideways, just as the rifle fired. The bullet sparked against the wall, showering her with bits of concrete. She scrambled to her knees, ears ringing, as heavy boots pounded toward them from the approaching vehicle. The tall man swung the rifle toward the noise, backing up slowly. She pressed herself against the wall, breath coming in quick sobs, watching as more figures stormed into the underpass. "Drop the weapon," a deep voice barked. The tall man snarled, eyes darting between her and the approaching officers. "You think they'll save you?" he spat. And then, without warning, he hurled the rifle aside and lunged for her with his bare hands. His speed was shocking. Before she could react, his fingers clamped around her wrist, yanking her to her feet. "Let her go," someone shouted. He didn't. His grip tightened, his other hand grabbing the torn collar of her shirt, dragging her closer until his furious eyes burned inches from hers. "You're coming with me," he growled. "No," she screamed, struggling wildly, kicking at him, but his hold was iron. Behind him, the officers closed in, weapons drawn. But he didn't care. He began dragging her backward, away from them, toward the darkness at the far end of the underpass. Her husband shouted her name, his voice hoarse but desperate. She kicked again, clawed at his arm, but he didn't let go. His fingers dug into her skin as he hauled her toward the shadows. Then she saw it, a dark van screeching into view at the far end of the underpass, its back doors already open, ready to swallow her whole. And the man dragging her was laughing now, low and dark. The van's engine roared louder, closer, closer, and before the officers could reach them, he yanked her hard, and they both vanished into the blinding headlights of the van. Her feet scraped along the rough ground as the man dragged her toward the van, her nails clawing at his arm, her voice raw from screaming. The headlights blinded her, her shadow long and desperate in the glare. "Let me go," she cried, kicking wildly. Her knee connected with his leg, but he barely staggered, his grip like iron. "Get her inside," a voice shouted from the van. The man laughed, that same cold, hateful laugh that made her stomach twist. He was stronger than anyone she had ever faced, his fingers biting into her skin as he shoved her toward the open doors. Behind them, the officers yelled, their footsteps pounding closer. Gunshots cracked through the night, sparks ricocheting off the metal sides of the van, but it didn't stop. The man spun her around, using her body like a shield as he backed toward the van. Her husband's voice cut through the chaos, hoarse, desperate, furious. "Let her go." She twisted in the man's grip, her eyes darting back through the dark. She saw him, still leaning against the wall under the overpass, blood running down his side, one hand pressed against the wound, the other reaching out to her even though he could barely stand. Her heart broke at the sight. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, struggling harder. "Quiet," the man snarled, shaking her. She felt the edge of the van's metal frame hit her back as he tried to shove her inside. Her foot caught on the rim, and she clung to the door with both hands, refusing to let go. "No, I'm not going," she screamed, kicking back at him. He yanked her hair, dragging her head back, his breath hot and rancid against her ear. "You don't get to choose." A loud metallic clang rang out as one of the officers fired again, the bullet sparking off the van's bumper. The man cursed, jerking his head toward the shooter. That split-second distraction was all she needed. She twisted, hard, her nails raking across his face. He roared in pain, releasing her just long enough for her to drop to the ground. She scrambled, crawling under the van, her hands burning on the rough asphalt. But he was fast. His hand shot down, gripping her ankle. She kicked wildly, her shoe flying off and clattering into the dark. He dragged her back, her nails clawing uselessly at the ground. "Help!" she screamed, her voice breaking. Then a roar. Not from the van, not from the cops. A deep, unmistakable roar that made everyone freeze. At first, she thought her ears were playing tricks on her. But then she saw them. Two massive shapes bursting from the shadows of the underpass, low to the ground, muscles rippling, eyes glowing under the dim light. Dogs. Huge, black military dogs, their teeth bared, their growls like thunder rolling over the pavement. The man's grip on her ankle faltered. His eyes widened. "What the?" The first dog lunged, clamping onto his arm with a savage bite. He screamed, releasing her instantly. She scrambled backward, heart pounding, as the second dog circled him, snarling, ready to strike. She looked up, breathless, stunned. Standing at the mouth of the underpass, bloodied but unbroken, was her husband, an admiral not just of the Navy, but of these beasts, his soldiers in fur and fangs. "Let her go," he commanded, his voice low, cold, and shaking with fury. The man thrashed as the dog dragged him to the ground, the rifle clattering away into the dark. "Call them off," he screamed, terror cracking his voice. Her husband stepped closer, one hand pressing against his side, the other raised in a signal. The dogs obeyed, circling but not releasing, their growls vibrating in the still night. "You have no idea what you've just done," her husband said softly, his voice carrying a deadly calm. The man whimpered now, blood dripping from his bitten arm, his earlier confidence shattered. The van's engine roared louder as someone inside shouted, "Go! Go!" The tire screeched, the vehicle swerving to speed away. But her husband raised his hand again, a sharp signal. The dogs leapt forward, their powerful legs eating up the distance as they chased the fleeing van into the dark. Gunshots echoed as the van's door slammed shut, but the dogs kept running, disappearing into the night like shadows of vengeance. She stared, her chest heaving, her mind reeling from everything she'd just seen. Her husband stumbled toward her, and she rushed to him, catching him before he could fall. "You came, you really came," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. He managed a weak smile, brushing a bloody hand against her cheek. "I told you. I'll never let anyone take you." But before she could answer, before she could even hold him tighter, a deafening explosion rocked the distance, lighting up the night sky in orange and red, the direction the dogs had run, the direction the van had fled. The ground trembled under their feet. The officer shouted, running toward the flames in the dark. Her husband's eyes widened, reflecting the fire. And then, through the ringing in her ears, through the smoke and chaos, came another sound, low and chilling, footsteps approaching from the other side of the underpass. Slow, steady, too many to count. She froze, gripping her husband's arm as shapes emerged from the shadows, dark silhouettes moving in a line, their eyes glinting with the same cold hatred as the man who had just tried to take her. There were more of them, many more, and they were coming straight for them.